What's up, broski nation? It's your boy. Oh, just a second. Oh, hey, mom. No, that was just a joke. You don't have to answer that question. Do my parents really love me? That's very honest. You didn't have it. Okay, but I gotta go film a video now, mom. Okay, I'll talk to you later. Bye bye. Oh, what's up, broski nation? It's your boy, Bad Boy Jens. You know how it is. How are you doing? Today I'm going to show you how to play and write like Mac Demarco, how to strum like him, how to create a chord progression like him, how to create a melody like him. We're going to analyze the heck out of him. I don't want to get demonetized. So that's what we're going to do. It will be exciting. I'll show you everything as I just said, and I won't say it again, but I will show you a lot. And we will write a song together, and in that way I'll show you how you can write a song like him or get inspired by him any way you like. Also, thank you so much for the support on my last video and for the support for the past couple of days. It really means a lot to me that so many of you have subscribed. It really does. So let's try to hit 2 million subscribers before this Saturday. No, that's a bit too much maybe. Let's try to hit 1 million subscribers before this Saturday, and that will be very cool. Now, all jokes aside, thank you so much for the support. I really am grateful. Also, I thought of a cool idea, if I may say so myself. We can figure out songs together for the upcoming weeks. Since we all have to stay inside, I thought it would be cool to have you guys vote for the next song, and then we can figure out the song together on Twitch. And then I will in the end also make a YouTube video on it. But if you want to see how I figure out the song, if you want to chit chat, if you want to chill, if you want to hang, then follow me on Instagram and also follow me on Twitch, because yeah, that's how we can do it then. So you can vote then on which song you would like to hear next on my Instagram, and then we can figure out the song together. You can help me, I can help you. It will be a fun time. So yeah, it would be lovely if you could follow me on those social medias. Anyways, let's get into the video now. I think it will be a good idea to again use some sort of chapters in the description. However, I really recommend you to watch the whole thing through, because all bits of information are connected with each other, so you might not understand everything if you skip to the ending part. So first of all, let's talk a bit about how to set up our amp and our guitar to sound a bit more like Mac Demarco, and also how to set up our pedals if we use any. I also talked about this in my last video, but now I will shortly talk specifically about how to get a sort of Mac Demarco sound on your guitar. So first of all, what's important is that on your guitar, with whatever guitar you have, to change the settings to the treble sound on your guitar, to the treble pickups, to the lead switch. It's difficult to say, but a lot of guitars have like you can switch between treble and rhythm, and I think Mac Demarco plays a lot on treble, so which makes your guitar sound a bit more bright. So this is the rhythm sound more, you could say, quite warm, and this is more treble sound, so the most bright sounding settings, or not the most, but the more bright and sharp sounding setting on your guitar, which is usually the switch between rhythm and treble, and then you choose for treble. You can also change the settings on your amp to a more treble sound, so turning the knob treble all the way up, or sometimes it's called high, I think, and turn that one up, not all the way, but just a bit more, so to have a more bright, punchy sound on your guitar. If you have reverb on your amp, I suggest you tune that up a bit as well, like on average, not too much, because the song we're going to write together will be quite punchy and quite fast, so then a lot of reverb isn't a good idea. So around average the reverb, or even a bit less, would work. And then when we look at the pedals, somebody noted in my last video, which is a very good sort of correction, is that Mac Demarco doesn't use a chorus pedal so much when he's recording his music. He uses like a mixer, and he changes the vibrato in some sort of way that he creates this specific sound. However, when he plays live, he does use a chorus pedal, so we will use it as well if you have one. If you don't have one, that's totally fine. But if you have a chorus pedal, the best way to make it sound more like Mac Demarco is turn the rate all the way up and the depth all the way down, or almost all the way down. That's how you get this more Mac Demarco sound. I have it on right now. So that's it. If you don't have a chorus pedal, don't worry too much. If you also don't know how to, switch between pickups to get the sound, that's also fine. The sound that Mac Demarco creates mostly lies in his way of playing the guitar, which we will get into in a few minutes. Because another important signature thing of Mac Demarco, you could say, is the use of a capo. I'll explain to you why he uses a capo and why you would maybe want to use a capo as well. We won't use a capo for the song we're going to write, because I know that not all of you have a capo, so it would be very sad to use a capo then. However, I'll explain to you why he uses one and why you could use one. You might know how a capo works. It detunes your guitar as well sometimes, but basically the use of a capo, you could see it as some sort of finger you're putting on your string. So instead of placing my finger like this, I just put a capo where I'm having my index finger, and I could do this. You hear that? It's really the same sound, only I can then play an open chord. I don't have to play barré chords at this point because I have a capo over there. You sort of change the tuning a bit higher up, but not really, but I hope you understand how it works. It's basically just barring the strings where the capo is. And then the capo looks a bit silly, because now you might say, well, why would you use a capo? Because you can also just leave the capo out and just play a barré chord or something like that, or play the chords with your fingers. Now there are a couple of reasons why you still want to use a capo. Is because the sound of an open chord is just a tad bit different than the sound of an barré chord. So this sounds a lot more open than this, or a lot more, just a tad bit. But the idea is that I think Mac Demarco uses a capo is because, especially when he's playing some chords, for example the first chord in his chord progression or the last one, he likes to have that one really be full, have that one ring out. And the best way to get that is, well, maybe not play a barré chord, but to play an open chord. However, this playing the chords over here might be too low in Mac Demarco's vocal range. So to be able to play open chords and on an open chord and to also sing higher melodies, he just places a capo on the 4th or the 3rd or the 2nd fret, and he can, it detunes my guitar, but in that way he can play open chords on a higher position, giving him the possibility to sing in his vocal range that is comfortable for him, and that is also still being able to play open chords. Again, the reason is that you can sustain your chords better in some sort of way. I hope you understand what I mean. It's easier to let this ring through than to place a barré chord, because you're more dependent on your fingers, on your index finger being very tight towards the frets. The other reason that Mac Demarco might use a capo is because also in his melodies for the second guitar, he likes to sometimes end on open notes on the strings. So to do something like, my guitar is very much detuned now because I'm switching the capos, but he likes to do that as well. And it would be very difficult, some of his melodies, if you would have to place your finger on the spot where the capo is. You would have to do something like that. Looks weird and it doesn't work. So that's the reason why Mac Demarco uses a capo, I think. So now we've talked about the gear and how to set up your guitar. Again, we won't use a capo because otherwise not everyone can play along. Anyways, now we're getting to the chord progression of the song. So first of all, we can now choose if you first want to write a melody or first want to write a chord progression. I think Mac Demarco usually comes up with a chord progression and then creates a melody on top of that. I might be wrong, but when you look at his melodies, the melodies are a lot of times really based around the chords. So that would suggest sort of that he first comes up with a chord progression and then with a melody. Could be the other way around as well, but they are really intertwined, the melodies and the chords. So in that sense, it doesn't matter that much what you begin with. But now we're going to write a song, a chord progression together. What's interesting is that Mac Demarco sort of has two types of chord progressions, you could say. The one being quite very much approachable, nothing too weird going on, and the other one being a bit more jazzy and a bit more dissonant, so there's a bit more tension in his chord progressions. So for the song that we're going to make, we will first have a chord progression that's very approachable, so that Mac Demarco uses as well. So really following the rules of the scale, you could say. And we will also use for the second chord progression, the more jazzy, a bit more complex chord progression. However, there are a few keys that Mac Demarco likes to play in relative to the capo. The keys that he enjoys to play in, you could say the scales are E major, E major, A major, also D I think, and G. So but first let's start with the first chord progression. You could see this as the verse. A lot of Mac Demarco songs start with a verse, then a chorus, then a verse again, then a chorus, then an outro, sometimes with a solo. So we will do that as well. So first let's start off with a very approachable, catchy, rather following the rules chord progression. Now I really recommend you to watch a video I made on chord progressions, because they really explain how a chord progression works, how to create one as well, and also how you know which chords you can play inside a scale. I will shortly talk about this, but I really recommend you to watch that video, since that will make this a lot easier for you. But if you let's say we're choosing to play something in the key of E. This is the E chord, as you might know, like that. Then it will be useful to write the chords that fit within the E major scale. So you want to write something in E major, so we write down all the chords that fit in the E major scale, and those are these. I don't know where I'll put them, here or over here. Those are the chords that fit within the E major scale. Now if you want to know which chords fit in a certain scale, that's a very good question. One way is to watch the video I just talked to you about. There I explain really in detail how that works. The other one is to just Google it. So if you choose, like, I want to play something in A, you can look up the chords that fit within the A major scale. But as I just said, these chords fit within the E major scale. So in E major, F sharp minor, G sharp minor, A major, B major, and then D sharp diminished. So those are really the chords that we can use. And there are certain techniques that Mac Demarco uses. I'm not saying that Mac Demarco does it like this, like he writes down the chord progression, but you will see this a lot, that he follows sort of the rules inside, you know, that he uses really the chords that fit within a certain key. And there's one thing that's really distinctive in a Mac Demarco chord progression, in a lot of songs by the way, but something that Mac Demarco really makes use of a lot is going from the fifth note of the scale back to the first note, or the fifth chord of the scale back to the first chord of the scale. So for E major, that we're writing in, that would be the B major. So going from the B major. So that's something we want in our chord progression as well, because that's something that Mac Demarco does as well. Then for the notes in between that, we're really free to choose almost. We can choose any notes. Well, we can choose any notes also outside of the scale, but the nice sounding ones, or the very approachable ones, will be from this scale. So we can choose two other chords, and we have a 4 chord progression. Let's say we're choosing the 6th and the 2nd chord, so that would then be 1, 6, 2, 5 would be your chord progression. So first being the E major, then the C sharp minor, then the F sharp minor, and then a B. Now comes another very important Mac Demarco characteristic. It's that he likes to play more jazzy chords, so minor 7s, mainly, and sometimes a major 7, but most of his minors are always 7, like the chords. So then we would have something like E major, so the tonic, so the first note in his key is a lot of times just a tritone, so like a triad, so only consisting of 3 notes, just a simple E. But then the notes in between it, or the other notes in the chord progression, are a lot of times major, minor, or dominant 7s. So then the C sharp minor would be a C sharp minor 7, like that. I'll work it into the strumming pattern. And then the F sharp minor would be an F sharp minor 7. And for the B, we're doing a B dominant 7. And that's something that Mac Demarco does as well a lot. In general, you will find this a lot, that the 5th note or the 5th chord, looking at the scale or looking at the key, is a dominant 7. Because this chord, this B7 in our example, is almost really begging to go back to the first note of the scale, which is the E, to the tonic. So you can hear that, it's like, it solves very nicely into the first chord. So then we already have our first chord progression, so a 1-6-2-5 chord progression. Again, I really hope this makes sense. If not, watch my video on chord progressions, there I explain how this works. But basically what we're doing, we're using the chords from a scale in a certain order. That's what we're doing, and we're ending on the 5 because that's what Mac Demarco does as well. A lot. Not always, but he likes to do that. And the reason why these chords fit within the scales, because all these chords that I just played have notes that fit within the E major scale. So the E major scale exists of a couple of notes, or of 7 notes, and all the chords that fit within the scale have those notes in them. So yeah, this is why this is a very approachable chord progression, because it fits very well. It follows the rules sort of music theory, you could say. That's a very bad way to say it, but it is, you know, there's not that much very much weird happening. We will get into it as well, to the more weird chords that Mac Demarco's playing. But yeah, so that's the first part of a chord progression, the verse, we could say. Then the strumming pattern, we will use a more happy sounding, punchy, catchy strumming pattern that Mac Demarco uses. So that you could say, well, not really, but you can say that Mac Demarco uses 2 types of strumming patterns, sort of. You have the very much bassy one, which he uses a lot in acoustic songs, like so with a heavy focus on the bass notes and sometimes an upstroke. We will use this technique for the second part of our song, but the other one is a very more catchy strumming pattern like this. It's very straight to the point, it's very tightly played, I hope you know what I mean. The notes don't sustain so long, it's very catchy, very rhythmic, and also a bit, mostly rhythmic. So we will use this for our verses because the chord progression is quite approachable, so there's a lot of room to have it sound quite rhythmic and straight to the point and catchy. So the chord progression, the strumming pattern will be something like this. Like that. So it sounds very similar to Freaking Out the Neighborhood and to other, you know, more upbeat Mac Demarco tunes. I will show you how to do the strumming pattern. So it's like Mac Demarco likes to use these muted hits in between as well, where he does. You hear that? So where he mutes the string with his right hand and then plays the notes like this. So then we have like that. And if you play it a bit faster, it sounds like this. I hope you can hear what I'm trying to make clear, that it sounds a bit like, oh well, yeah, a more upbeat, happy sounding Mac Demarco chord progression. Oh, now Mac Demarco also, in almost all of his songs, creates a second guitar melody, which we will do as well, of course, because I said I will do that, so we will do that. And I talked about this technique many times, but what he does is he does really 2 different things, sort of. Sometimes he creates a sort of guitar melody, you could say, which is sometimes similar to the vocals and sometimes like a different type of melody, and sometimes he really plays a more almost country way of playing melodies that fit well within the chords, which we will do. We will sort of, and also he mixes these 2 techniques as well, where he creates a melody that fit very well within the chords but also have their own distinguishable melody. So how we're going to write a melody is we're going to look at different voicings of the chords and try to come up with a melody that fit well within these chords. The other characteristics, you could say, of Mac Demarco melodies, especially in like the albums 2 and Salad Days, is that the melody is quite also catchy and not so much sustaining notes, very melodic and also a bit rhythmic. So we will try to do that as well. It sounds vague now, but I will show you an example. So the chords that we're having are these. So So like that, that's the chords that so those are the chords, and then we can try to look at different voicings of those chords, so different places to play those chords to create a melody. So the first chord is a E major. Now you can also play an E major over here. Now to know where you can play those other chords, it's just a lot of practice and also looking up different voicings of chords. But you can play an E major here, also over here, which is basically the same. It's really a D chord, but then not a D sharp, but then an E chord, so an E major. So we can use these notes to create a chord progression, which is something Mac Demarco does as well a lot, where he doesn't necessarily use the exact same voicing that the first guitar is playing in, so he doesn't create a melody like this, but more a higher sounding one, so further up the neck. You don't necessarily only have to play the notes of the chord, so we do have an E major here. That doesn't mean that we only can play these 3 notes. We can also do something like, you can just move a bit away from the chords, not too far. Well, you can do whatever you want, but if you want to play a bit like Mac Demarco, he doesn't go all the way like doing very complex stuff. So what I thought about was something like this. Like that. Just a simple repetitive melody like. Mac Demarco also really likes to use slides in his second guitar melody, so we will also slide the first note. And we're basically making use of this E major, but then also adding this note to it, the A note, which fit well within the which fit well within the E major as well. It's just a sus4 you're really playing. That doesn't make that if that doesn't make that much sense, that's totally fine. It's just all about how it sounds, you know. So this sounds alright. That's really what it's all about. Even like if I would play this note, there's a bit more tension. Like we can use it as well, but for this part of the song we will try to create some like an approachable melody. So that will be. And you might notice that I'm playing these notes on top of the E major and the C sharp minor. So we're doing do 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 do. So we're still staying here. The reason why that works, you might have guessed it already, is that the E major and the C sharp minor 7 are really similar to each other. You can almost hear it. This is an E, this is the C sharp minor 7. There's only like 1 note difference. And especially with this over here, these 3 notes fit within both the E major and both within the C sharp minor. You hear that? So to come up with this, to know this, is that the C sharp minor is the relative minor of E. So that means that they really have both keys have the exact same notes and the chords are quite similar to each other. So for E that's C sharp minor. If you want to be able to say that more quicker or to know that, there's a sort of a shortcut you could say, like a rule of thumb, is that when you have the major note, you could say, so this is an E major or an E note, and you go 4 semitones down, 1, 2, or 3 semitones down, I mean, you have the relative minor. So for E, this is an E note. If we go 3 half steps down, 1, 2, 3, you have a C sharp. So E major is the relative minor key, or E major is the relative major key of the C sharp minor. Like that. And so the C major key, which is C note, is over here. If you then go 3 half steps down, 2, 3, you have the A. So this, the C major is the relative major key of A minor. I hope that makes sense. Also, if this doesn't make sense, the idea is that the E major and the C sharp minor are very similar chords, so that's why the notes you play on top of them can almost stay the same. So yeah, so that's the melody for the first 2 chords. So then for the next chord we're going to the F sharp minor 7. But you can also play an F sharp minor over here. So we will also make use of that. So then we could do something like, just like that. That's something that Mac Demarco likes to do as well, just a slide within the chord, so to say. So this is an F sharp minor, like that. So then we would have Just simple as that. Boy Pablo also used this technique quite a lot, so. And then we're going to the B major, the B major 7, and then I came up with this. Also sounds a bit like Mac Demarco, I hope. So basically again doing a slide, but then from a bit of an odd spot, a bit of a dissonant spot. And what I'm basically doing is I'm playing, instead of playing the B major over here, I'm playing the B major over here, as simple as that. So you might know that a lot of chords you can play at different spots, so the B major can be played on a lot of places, but one of them is also over here. So I'm basically doing making use of this voicing. And this is rather a note that doesn't fit well within the scale, but that's alright. It creates a bit of tension, a bit of goofiness almost, you could say. And a hammer-on is also something that you will see any guitarist do, but Mac Demarco as well. So if you fit those 3 things together, we would have something, or 4 things together, we would have something like this. Like that. So we could use this melody that we just created throughout the whole verse, which is something that Mac Demarco does as well sometimes. So he creates one nice sounding melody that fits well within the chord progression and he repeats that. However, there's something else that Mac Demarco likes to do as well. For example, in the Stars Keep on Calling My Name, where he creates like 2 melodies out of one melody, where he repeats the first part for every melody, but then the ending of the melody, you could say, is different. So for example, for our song we can do something like, for the first time, and then the second time we can do something like. So that's something that Mac Demarco likes to do as well, where he has like where he creates 2 melodies, and the first one is going upwards, so sounding higher, and the second one sounding lower, so ending on the open snares as well, which is nice. Sometimes he also repeats the melody, and the last time the melody he ends with the open snares, but he also switches it up. So then we would have something like. And the reason why these notes work is very simple. So the beginning is the same, fits within the E and the C sharp minor. These 2 notes fit within this F sharp minor 7, because you have an E over here and an E over here, so we're really playing an F sharp minor 7 chord. And then the second chord is a B7, and if we do this, we're playing a B7 chord, because this is a B7 chord as well. So we're playing the bottom 2 notes of that chord. Very simple. So yeah, and going downwards with this melody, so using the open strings, create some more openness, you could say, a more resting and comforting melody. So this is quite tight, and this is more sustaining, more calming, you could say. So that's our verse that we have now. Simple as that, almost. I hope it was clear. But now we're going to the chorus of the song. And what you might realize in a lot of Mac Demarco songs is that the chorus opens up, the song opens up a bit more in the chorus. So sometimes the chord progressions become a bit more complex, but also the drums and the way the guitar is drummed especially is in a more open way, a more sustaining way. So for example in Salad Days you can hear this very well. And in Ode to Viceroy as well, I think, and also in My Kind of Woman, the song opens up a bit more. Yeah, I hope you understand what I mean, because in our song, for example, this is very tight, but the opening could be more like. That could be for our song, and for example in Freaking Out the Neighborhood you have this as well. The chords last longer, the chords sustain a bit longer, the drums open up, it's all less tight, yeah, I hope you understand what I mean. The song comes a bit more complex. The verses are quite tight, very rhythmic and more rhythmic, and the chorus open up a bit and are more melodic and more sustaining notes and more sounds like there's more space within the song. So for our song, we now want to create a more complex chord progression. So what's very interesting about Mac Demarco's songwriting and chord progression, that he sometimes does stuff like we are doing now. We're like, okay, that's not too weird. I would expect him or an artist to do that. But then he does like some very cool and chords where like, how the heck did he come up with it, you know? And we're going to try to do that as well, which is tricky because now we really have to, the stuff I talked to you about scales, we do follow the scale still, but we do want to float a bit away from this because the notes that fit within the scale that we talked about, they sound nice, they're very approachable, but we want to create a bit more tension, a bit more surprise, you could say, within the song. So we're going to try to do that. And there are a couple of ways you can do this. First of all is to look at very difficult jazz theory that can explain why the thing you're doing sounds nice, sort of. So you can do some crazy chords that nobody would expect, and you could explain it in the end by probably some jazz theory on why it sounds nice, why it fits within a certain scale that you have never heard of. You know what I mean? So because of course there's more scales than simply the major and minor scales. So really everything that you play on the guitar can be explained according to music theory, I think, in some sort of way, almost always. But that's difficult, and I don't think Mac Demarco comes up with that as well. He's not. I don't think he's studying jazz theory to find out exactly what kind of cool thing he can do. It might be, that would be very impressive. It's impressive anyway. But the other way that we can go about this is to still look at the scale, still look at the chords that fit well, but then try to play those chords that you would expect, but then in a way that you wouldn't. So for example, we would expect a C sharp minor playing in E major, but we can just play a different type of C sharp, so a C sharp 7. Or we can throw in maybe a different chord that you wouldn't expect, like a G major, which you wouldn't expect so much in an E major chord progression. So we're going to try to do that. So I come up with this part for the beginning. So how you can come up with this and how I came up with this. So the first chord is again an E. We're still staying within the E major scale. You can switch to another scale. Mac Demarco doesn't always do that. Sometimes he stays within he keeps the verses and the choruses in the same scale or the same key as he was playing them in already. So we're going to do that as well. Simply an E major. And then instead of doing a C sharp minor 7, which is something we would expect, we're doing some sort of C sharp diminished chord. And what we're also going to do is we're going to have some of these strings be open, sort of. So the open G major and the open E should be hearable. Mac Demarco uses this chord also in Freaking Out the Neighborhood, and I think another song, but I forgot which one it was. But yeah, this chord. Now why this works, I could try to explain it. I have some ideas on why it works, but the best way to look at it is, he's just moving a bit away from what you would expect, which is what we're really doing. Instead of playing a C sharp minor 7, we're doing a different weird chord. We could also try a C sharp 7, like. Sounds cool as well, right? Sounds nice as well. So that's really a way to maybe create some tension in your chord progressions is to look at what you would expect and then do something unexpected, which is what we're doing now. Also, a different technique that's hidden within this chord or these chords is that Mac Demarco likes to ring out some open strings throughout a song sometimes, or throughout a chord progression. So now it's the E note that's really ringing through. So you have the E, I'm talking about the bottom E note. And especially this chord with the open G and the open E sounds very open and full, which we want in our chorus, as I talked about. Now the second chord that we have in this chord progression is a D major 7, which is also weird if you know which notes are in the E major scale, because there's another D note in the E major scale. Now again we're doing something to to flow away from the things you would expect. And the reason why you could use this D major 7, you can play any note, by the way. I'm like trying to explain why things sound good, but you really can't, since everything sounds good as long as you think it sounds good. But according to the scale, or according to music theory, you could say this D major 7 works because a C sharp diminished chord really solves nicely into the chord that's a semitone next to it. That's the thing with these diminished chords. That is also something that King Cruel uses a lot, and Rex Orange County and Mac Demarco also a bit, is that these diminished chords, like this one, or you can play it like this, they solve very well into the next chord, to the note really that's next to them. But we're playing the D major 7 over here. So the other reason why this D major 7 might fit still within this scale is because the D major 7 is a relative minor or the relative major key of the F sharp, and an F sharp does fit within the E major scale. So that's another reason why this could work. But again, the best way I think to look at it is to just look at what you would expect following the scale and then try to do something different, which we are doing now. And then the last chord is an A7. You would expect an A major 7 according to the scale, you could say, because there's no G in the E major scale, but there's a G sharp. However, we will use a A7 because, you know, as I said, we're trying to flow a bit away from what you would expect, so we're playing an A7. Now again, this could be explained in some other way. It might be that we just changed keys within the chord progression, which makes it explainable that an A7 sounds nice, but that's not really what matters. It matters that we're trying to break the rules a bit, as the bad boys that we are. So that's really the first part of the chord progression of the chorus, and the second part will be exactly the same, only with a different ending chord, which will be the 5 of the E, because that's also what Mac Demarco likes to do. I will show you how the second part then goes. So you might hear that the last note we're really playing an extra bar, how do you say that, like a few extra seconds to almost have you back to go back to the E. So he used this in chord progression as well, where he plays this ending chord, which is the 5 going back to the 1, a longer time to really create this feeling of wanting to go back to the E major. So as I said, the verses have a very strict and tight strumming pattern. The chorus open up a bit as well with the strumming pattern. So now we're going to use Mac Demarco strumming pattern that he uses a lot in acoustic songs as well, which is a strumming pattern that's really based around the bass notes a lot, and then doing sometimes an upstroke. So that would sound like this. I hope you can hear it. So when I'm playing this E major chord, I hope you can see it well. I'm playing the bass notes mostly, and then sometimes an upstroke. So like that. Like in you can hear this very well, for example, in Treat Her Better. And then almost all of his acoustic songs. So yeah, that's the technique that we're using. Well, it creates a more bassy vibe, but also a more open vibe, especially compared to the tight strumming pattern of our verses. Oh hey there, I was just editing the video and I forgot something quite important, and that is that Mac Demarco also has a very distinctive way of switching between chords, and I'll show you what I mean. It's that between chords he tends to just play the strings open, so just not playing any chord but just something like in between the chords. So that should sound like this. I'm now doing it quite obvious, but I hope you understand what I mean, what I'm talking about. So basically playing all the open strings without playing a chord, so just like that. Especially in his choruses or his more more sustaining parts, you know, where there's space to do this, he tends to do this. Now we're again going to create a second guitar melody, because that's what Mac Demarco does as well. And in some of his melodies for the verses or for the choruses, which were now when he tends to lower the intensity of his melody a bit of the guitar, so it's more, he uses more arpeggiated notes. So you can hear this in Salad Days, for example, very well, or you can't hear it very well, which is why it's a bit more subtle and a bit more, the chords are really there, or the second guitar is really there to sustain, to help the chords that are played. So not so much, it doesn't really have the function of a melody, but more so much to create more space to fill up the room with sound. Yeah, and not so much with a specific melody, but more the sound of the chords. So we will try to do that as well. We can do something like this, which we are playing in the E major over here, as I talked to you about earlier. So for the first note we can do basically playing notes of the E major scale. You hear that? So, and then for the next note it's a bit tricky, because then he's playing this diminished chord, but we can try to look at where the notes are as well. So for this chord we can almost stay in the same spot as the chord is being played. So we have something like that, or maybe, yeah, that might be a better idea. So like that. Why these notes? I can play them because they fit within the C sharp triad. I'm adding this note, but this note is still within the C sharp diminished. So because it's the same note as played in the bass. So there's a C sharp here and a C sharp here, which why we can do. Then it goes to, our chord progression goes to a D major 7, which you can also play over here. So then we can do, and then it goes to an A7, which we can also play over here. Like that. Really just playing single notes of the chords, and then it sounds something like. Like that, very simple. If you do have a tremolo bar, this is also a place where you could use it, this thingy thing. So then we'll basically, oh, I hope you can see this. Then we'll basically on the last note we can do a small little tremolo. So this you will find also in The Way You Love Her. He uses like the tremolo bar for only a certain note in the melody. So yeah, I hope it's clear what I've done. We've based these chords around the chords that are played. Then the ending of our chorus is of course different. So normally we play an E major, an A major there, but now this is a B. So basically just playing the B over here. Like that. We can also play in B7 like this. So then it would sound something altogether like this. Something like that, you know. I'm just playing the chords at a different spot. That's what I'm really doing. And then in a more sustaining way and playing single notes. Now for the final part, I'll shortly talk about how to play a solo like Mac Demarco, which is a bit tricky, but we'll get there. So a lot of times the solo is or played on a different new chord progression or played on the same chord progression as the more approachable one. So the one of the verse in our example. So what Mac Demarco does a lot, and I talk about this in many videos, is that he again makes use of the relative minor scale. Specifically, he likes to play in minor pentatonic scales. So our chord progression is an E, and the relative minor, as I said before, is then 1, 2, 3, it's C sharp minor. So we can then play something in the C sharp minor scale, which you can now see over here. He likes this type of scale, so you can hear it in Viceroy. And also you can hear it very well in his live performance of One Another. Yeah, and the way he plays the guitar is in quite a bluesy way, I think. Maybe even a bit funky. He likes to play short, melodic, sometimes repetitive melodies with not that many sustaining notes, almost sort of the same way as he likes to play second guitar melodies, but then less bass around the chords. Now he's really playing in a C sharp minor scale. So now we're really playing in a C sharp minor scale. And he also goes a bit out of the scale sometimes, so then he does. So instead of doing, he does. He's still in the C sharp minor scale, but just not in this specific finger position anymore. And there are some techniques that he likes to use. Again, he keeps it very much melodic, but he likes to. I will show you in a couple of seconds, like an improvisation on this. But I'll tell you right now what techniques you can use as well. He likes to put a bit of vibrato on his notes, especially these ones. He likes to do hammer-ons. So it's quite bluesy, and he also likes to do sometimes a bend, not so much, and not so much in a sustaining way, so it's more like that, more bluesy you could say, like, so yeah, that's some techniques. And also, the techniques that he uses in the second guitar melody, again, like slides, he also uses in his solos. I can improvise a bit, like for solo guitar. I'm not that great, and it took me quite long to get to where I am. It can be quite difficult to create a solo. It isn't difficult. I shouldn't say that. You might have the feeling that you want to create something very cool, but it's not so much about sounding impressive. It's more about sounding melodic and nice. I think at least that's especially for Mac Demarco also important. It's not so much that he wants to show off all his extremely cool licks. He just wants to give you a catchy, cool melody. So that's what we're going to try to do as well. And if you're really not familiar with the scale, just try to stay within these minor pentatonic scales. I will sometimes try to flow out of it a bit as well, but that's what you can do. And again, you don't need to do something very impressive. It can just be something like, that's not too difficult, and it's still melodic, which is something we want to go after right now. So I'll try to come up with something. I don't know, something like that. So a couple of things I talked about. The bends aren't too long, mainly. So really bluesy licks, really. That's what he's really doing now that I come to think of it. Like things like this. It's just very bluesy. So a bend, like some pull-offs and a bit of vibrato as well. And at least what I was trying to do is small, short, melodic segments like, and then a new segment. Like that. So not so much silence in between the notes, but it is still clear segments. So what you will notice a lot of times with trying to play a solo, which happens to me as well, is that you just keep on playing and there's not really a story going on. It's just notes and notes and notes and notes and notes. But by really trying to create smaller segments, you can do that. So by creating a very clear ending, you know, or you can do that by just keeping some silence in between your solo. So like that, he's creating small segments, really small blues licks to create his solo. Wow. I'm not like wow what a solo, but I'm like wow what a long video. I really hope I made everything clear. There's one final very important thing I want to say, is that it is very cool to try to sound like a certain artist, but I think this video is really useful to get inspired by. I don't necessarily recommend you to try to exactly now play like Mac Demarco, but I do recommend you to get inspired by him, because he's a brilliant musician and some of his songwriting techniques and his way of playing the guitar are really interesting, and that's something you can really go for as a guitarist. But it's in any way still a lot of fun to try to play like a certain artist, because what I think you might notice is that even when you're really trying to play like a certain artist, you will still add your own flavor, your own feel to it. And also Mac Demarco also wrote some songs in this way, where he tried to write a song exactly like another artist, or not exactly, he tried to write a song like a certain artist, but he came up with something completely different. And that's a very interesting thing and a cool thing to try. Also, I think I'm trying to the song that I just started to try to make a real song out of it. So by adding drums and the bass and stuff like that, I will keep you updated on that. I will put it on Spotify and stuff like that if it's and when it's up. But I am looking forward to that. I want to give a huge thank you to Marvin or MJ. Really thank you so much for your kind message. It really means a lot to me. Also a huge thank you to Daniel. Thank you so much for your donation as well.